deputies had a gun drawn on him. Mr. Ripley, as you see, is not a spring chicken. As a matter of fact, he's 70 years old, and he was never been accused of any crime in his entire life. And then the sheriff shows him on television saying that he did these crimes, and even to this day, people think that John actually committed these crimes. Some of his acquaintances have mentioned it, and John has to explain to him, no, because the sheriff got on the news. And this isn't the only time the sheriff has accused people on the news of crimes which never occurred. Recently, there was a couple who was accused of kidnapping a child, one of the most heinous crimes there is. And what happened? Those cases were dismissed. And they filed a lawsuit against the sheriff. The sheriff used a lot of detectives to get back at John for speaking. This cost taxpayers a lot of money and time and effort that you could use to finding murderers. Murder rate in the United States is going up. Houston, it's going up, and at San Antonio, I think it's going up. You got to get out there and stop those murderers, stop those child molesters. This is totally embarrassing, and the sheriff's department needs to be held accountable. And that's what this lawsuit is going to do. It's going to hold the sheriff accountable so that when he arrests someone, there is probable cause for the arrest. So first, before we get to John, and he's got a few words to say, but because now that there's a case pending, just like the sheriff's office, we're not. I've ordered John not to speak about the intricate facts. I can speak to that, but he probably will speak to about generalities like how do you feel and what do you want accomplished. But if you have any questions for me before we get to John, go ahead and ask the questions, and then we can get to John.
You mentioned in the filing that this was not only a civil rights issue, but a First Amendment violation. Do you believe that Mr. Ripley was targeted because he gave interviews in which he disparaged the sheriff and criticized some of these enforcement actions on the property?
It is the right of every citizen to criticize their government. Most jurists believe that is our most important right, to freely speak and criticize the government. And the sheriff retaliated against John for those criticisms, the criticisms of the sheriff's activities. One of the activities, which was I saw, or I believe was on YouTube, was when one of the sheriff's deputies drove his vehicle into some dry grass out by the mobile home park, and due to the heat, he got stuck out there in the grass. The fire started and consumed the entire vehicle, and then there were bullets flying off from the ammunition in the vehicle. And John had criticized that. And John also criticized when the sheriff got on the news and said there was a stolen equipment, heavy equipment on the property, which turned out to be not to be stolen property at all. So is the sheriff just making a bunch of mistakes after mistakes after mistakes? It doesn't appear so. The sheriff did this on purpose, what this lawsuit says, and that's what we believe. He did it because John was criticized, and that is every American's right to criticize the government. Where could we be if we can't even criticize the government? That's the role of the media. As a matter of fact, when you talk about the media, freedom of speech and freedom of the press, it's because of their checks on government. It's not necessarily the founding fathers didn't say, hey, we're going to have celebrities one day like Khloe Kardashian, and we want to be able to talk about Khloe Kardashian. They wanted the checks and balances on the public officials and the government. As a matter of fact, the English during the colonial period would shut down the presses, would tax the presses, and so forth. And so that's why we have the First Amendment, so that government does not oppress the people and to get out the word. One of the popular jurors, said that sunlight is the best disinfectant, meaning when everybody can see what's going on, then that'll be the cure. So, do you have any other further questions?
Wasn't there water being stolen, though? I mean, somebody messed with the meters, somebody installed pipes to divert water. So if not Mr. Ripley, then what is the backstory on who was responsible for that?
Right. Mr. Ripley does not get any benefit for when his residents steal water. Both of those residences were occupied by individuals at the time, and those individuals are responsible for the bills. So they must have been the ones probably who stole the water. So John was not aware water was being stolen. He gets no benefit from when people steal water. If I was the landlord of a condominium complex and one of my tenants goes out and to the Kroger and takes some food, is that my fault as the landlord? Of course not.
I hadn't been in control.
Right. And at the time of the incident, at the time of the investigation, Mr. Ripley had not even been the manager out there for several months. His brother was the manager. So the amount of evidence was almost like next to none. There was probably some evidence that maybe the residents, but they never did interview the residents. That would have been the main suspects. Where's the interview with the residents who are saving the money by stealing the water? It's not there. So what we see here is an obvious case of false arrest, and most likely, based upon all the evidence, it was because Sheriff Salazar was retaliating against Mr. Ripley for speaking to the press and speaking to the public about the things that were going on that he thought were unconstitutional.
I have other questions. I don't want to hog it, though.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Does your client at least concede that this is a problem property? It's a frequent target of arsonists. The fire marshal is there on a regular basis. It's essentially an East Bexar County eyesore. So shouldn't he, as the owner of the property, been doing more to keep it from falling into a state of disrepair and dilapidation?
Well, there are poor people in every city and every county, and they need a place to live. And Mr. Ripley's property was at such a price that these people could actually have a place to live. Were there a few problems out there? Yes, there's a lot of problems with a lot of poor places where the rent is low and so forth. And those savings were generally passed upon to the renters because of low rent.
What do you mean by poor places?
Well, places where the rent is not as low. That's what I mean by poor places. Low income housing, right? And so, should Mr. Ripley have done a little bit more? Well, that's a possibility. However, we're talking about Class C misdemeanors, and he looked at every single one of the violations, and when they were needed to be cured, I believe that he did his best to cure them, or he told the government that, hey, that maybe doesn't need to be cured. So was this a palace where John owned and managed in the past? No, but it's a place, and the treatment of John, that's what he shouldn't have been treated in that fashion by a false arrest.
My last question.
Yep.
Can you provide clarity on who owns the property currently? Our understanding is there are no longer any residents living out there. So what's the status of the ownership, and what are the plans for that huge area of land?
Yep. While there is a court case pending with John's brother and so forth, and the issue is whether John owns the entire place still, or whether his brother and another sibling own 2/3 of it. So he's still at least a part owner, and it's actually under litigation, the exact amount of the ownership, but he's still an owner. As far as the plans, his brother is the manager now, and so you'd have to ask his brother what the plans are.
So there's a dispute over percentage of ownership, but he is, as at least part owner, is allowing his brother to manage it?
No, Mr. Ripley wanted to continue managing it, but I believe there was
Judge Haas refused to stop my brother from taking it over.
In other words, so there was a legal proceeding where his brother took over the management. Okay. And that happened at least 2 or 3 months before the investigation into the water theft happened. So at the time of the water theft, alleged water theft, he wasn't even the manager for several months, and they knew that. They were aware of who was the manager. So it definitely appears, from everything that I can see, that Sheriff Salazar was retaliating against John Ripley for criticizing, which is the very heart of the First Amendment. Okay, well, do you have any general questions for Mr. Ripley?
Si quisieras hablar en español,
Si quiere en inglés, contestamos unas preguntas en español.
para mí es igual.
Le contesto, ahorita le pregunto unas cosas de todo esto.
Let's wait for the train to pass.
extraordinario o si también mi hermano y mi hermana son dueños de ahí.
Y de haber sido arrestado incorrectamente, ¿qué es lo que usted dice y cómo se siente?
Sí,
¿Qué puede decirnos al respecto?
pues ellos alegan que mi mamá fue dueño de ahí, del Parque de los Remorques, ¿verdad? Pero yo tengo documentación que yo soy el dueño ahí y que mi mamá no. Y aparte de eso, en unos juicios ahí en el Canadá, ellos negaron ser dueños de algo en Texas, de nada en Texas fueron dueños, dijeron ellos en el juzgado ahí. Entonces, pues con eso, sus pronunciamientos jurados, pues yo digo que yo soy dueño porque ellos niegan haber sido dueños y aparte tengo documentación.
Entonces usted está seguro que fue arrestado incorrectamente.
Pues yo no estuve encargado del parque cuando investigaron el robo del agua y aparte de eso, ellos alegan que yo o alguien robó las medidoras, pero las documentaciones de la SAD dice que en uno de los remolques, ellos mismos recogieron la medidora hace 2 o 3 meses antes de la investigación y que en el otro remolque nunca había una medidora ahí. Y así es que estoy acusado de robar 2 medidoras que no existen.
¿Qué espera sacar con esta demanda?
Pues quiero que Sheriff, el alguacil, mejor dicho en español, que quiero que él entienda que no se puede usar su oficina para propósitos políticos, para sus ambiciones políticas, y que sufran el pueblo. Y aparte de eso, el dinero que él está gastando en horas extraordinarias para los diputados son gastos al público, ¿verdad? No a gastos de él. Y lo están gastándolos en sus diputados consentidos.
I'm sorry,
Yep.
can he talk at all about his experience going to jail, what that was like? If I recall, that was during the height of the pandemic. There were a lot of cases
Yes.
of COVID inside the facility at that point.
Yes, yes.
But
Let me switch microphones here real quick.
Okay, 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 okay. Yeah.
Yeah, let me take that out. Thank you. Thank you. Put this on you, sir. Would you mind putting this in your pocket over here?
Okay.